as we prepare for lesson 2, I thought it would help if I talked through the notes and the general to-do list for lesson 2. So, lesson 2. First thing you want to do is read through the lesson in Jenney. Get an idea of what we're going to cover. Now, the first lesson we focused mostly on nouns. We learned a couple of verbs, est, there is, sunt, there are. Now we're actually going to learn our first group of verbs, and we're going to learn how verbs are grouped into decks of cards, the way that nouns were divided into decks. Remember, the noun decks are called declensions. So in nouns, we have groups called declensions, and each declension uses a same or similar set of endings. The one that we've learned so far is identified by the genitive singular ending AE. And we know that we form the base of the noun by taking that genitive singular form, like poetai, removing the genitive singular ending. Then we're left with the base that we use as the root that we add the ending to, and then the ending tells us the case and number, and the case tells us the role of the noun in the sentence. If I want to use accusative plural, I add long AS to that base, poet, poetas, and then I know I have the poets, and it's either the direct object of my sentence, or I might have a preposition that takes the accusative. We haven't learned one yet, but they're out there, and we will learn them. Now, this week, we're going to look at verbs. Verbs are grouped in conjugations that have the same set of endings. And when we form the different forms of the verb, it's called conjugating instead of declining. Sometimes we'll use the wrong word. We'll say we're conjugating a noun or declining a verb. Over time, we'll get used to it. I still will sometimes trip and say the wrong word. But in general, we should know. We decline a noun because they're grouped in declensions. That is the name that deals with nouns. We conjugate a verb, and they're grouped in conjugations. If you look at your notes that are found in the classroom under syntax notes, for lesson 2, you'll see that there are 4 conjugations of verbs in Latin. The first conjugation is identified by a second principal part that ends in are. The second conjugation ends in long ere. Third ends in short ere. There's one here in the middle. Fourth ends in long ire. There's an extra one here called third io that performs a little differently. It still has that short ere, but the first principal part has an extra I in it that we're not used to seeing. We're going to start with the first conjugation, just like we started with the first declension. And just like the first declension, A is integral to the first conjugation. Remember, our noun endings, we go through the cases. Nominative, let me make sure you can still see where I'm writing. There we go. Nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and sometimes vocative. We often leave vocative off the list. And then we have singular and plural. And we know our endings, A, AE, AE, AM, A with a long mark, A, AE, arum, is, as, is, AE. With a verb, we don't use cases. We have person and number instead of case and number. So once again, we still have singular and plural. Now we have first person, second person, and third person. What does that look like in English? What would our first, second, and third person be? First person singular would be I. I run, I eat, I go to the store. Second singular is you singular. I'm looking at one person and I'm saying, you run. You are running. You do run. Third is he or she or it or a singular noun or noun replacement. This would be our singular nominative, because remember, nominative is our subject. If we have I run, we don't have a subject in the nominative. But if we have the girl runs, then we would have Puella in the nominative singular. Currit runs. We don't know run yet, but that's okay. Now, plural in English, first person, we. Second person, you, plural. So now I'm looking at two people and I'm saying you two, or three or four, but plural, run. Sometimes we upgrade a single you person to a you plural out of respect. But in general, it's just plural. Third plural is they or a plural nominative. They run. Oh, I ran out of paper. They run. The girls run. That says nominative. So, we reviewed cases. We talked about what person and number is. Person tells us whether we're looking at ourselves, at you, or at someone over there, first, second, third person. We might think of perspective in a book, right? First person perspective, I'm telling the story from my own point of view. Third person, we're saying he does that. So that's another place we see first person, second person, third person. Now we want to talk about, okay, so if we have person and number in a verb, that must mean that we have some form of a base that gives us the meaning of the word, combined with an ending that tells us the person and number of the verb. So first, let's look at the base. How do we form it? Well, when we memorize a verb, we memorize 4 principal parts. We may not memorize all 4 of them to start, but over time, that's how we'll learn verb vocabulary. If I look at the verb to love, my 4 principal parts are amo, amari, amawi. Remember that V sounds like a W. Amatus. Now, if we look back on the previous page, you might remember that I said the ARE tells me that it's a first conjugation verb. That's my second principal part. It's also called my infinitive. My infinitive in English is formed by saying to in the verb. So technically, amare specifically means to love. We take, sorry about that, little bit of an earthquake. We take that second principal part, because that's going to be the form we use to make our base, and we cut off that RE. And we're left with AMA. So, with the noun, we use the second form to form the base. It was the genitive. Here, we also use the second form to make the base. I try and point out where it's the same and where it's different, because it's easier to remember something in relation to something you've already memorized. Our brains like to grow like trees, not poles with additional length on it. Does that make sense? The more that we can make those connections and fill in and grow our tree out, the easier it is for our brain to access that information. Now we add our endings to AMA to tell it whether it is I, you, he, she, it, we, you, or they. Okay, so let's look at the chart. This now I'm talking more about what's on the forms part of our notes. So this starts out first conjugation verbs, present tense. There's notes about each of these principal parts. I went and focused on the infinitive for our discussion, but let me back up a moment. This one here, amo, is the first person singular active form of the verb. Okay, what was my first person singular pronoun in that chart I made? I. I is first person singular. We, first person plural. And this means I verb in English. And amo means love, so it means I love. So the first principal part means I love, I verb. The second principal part means to love. Amare. The third principal part is the first person singular perfect tense. Now, we don't know the perfect tense yet. I didn't write present there, sorry. Let me add that in. We don't know the perfect tense yet. In English, it is I have verbed, I did verb, I verbed. So we can say I loved, I have loved, I did love. That's what amawi means. The fourth principal part, technically a supine, we can think of it like an adjective as we go on. But amatus Started to do it backwards on the last one. Means loving. Like, that dog, he is such a loving dog. So it's a verb, but we're using it like an adjective. There's also a way we can turn a verb into a noun. We'll talk about that another day. But for right now, I know my 4 principal parts exist. I know that the amo means I love, amare means to love, and that there's 2 others. And one's the past tense, and one is like an adjective form of the verb. Now we're going to look at how we form all of the parts of the verb, how we conjugate it. So we need singular and plural. And then we need first person, second person, third person. The first person is given to us. This is just like the nominative on the noun side. We just copy it over. Amo. All of the rest we have to form using the present stem. I'm going to suggest if you do your Latin in pen that you hold off on using the long mark over the A until the end, because some of the forms drop that long mark. So I'm going to fill out my chart. Oh, sugar. With AMA, because that's my base. And then I'm going to add my personal endings. We don't form this one. It's given to us. But I can tell you that the personal ending for first person, it's either going to end in an O or an M. We don't know the M cases yet. Right now we only know the O's, and they're given to us when we memorize the verb. All of the rest will form. The personal ending for second is S. For third is T. I should have done a plus sign there first, and I tried to make it the T. Mus means we. Tis means you plural. And NT means they. Third person, singular and plural, drop that long mark. The hat, the macron. The rest, keep it. So I'm going to add it to them now. Second singular, first plural, second plural. So what do my final forms look like? Amo, I just copy over. Amas. Amat. Amamos. Amatus. Amant. What does amo mean? Amo. There are 3 different ways we can translate a Latin present tense verb into English. They say amo. We can say 3 different things that mean amo. We can say I love, I do love, I am loving. That's true for all of these forms. So, amas means you singular love, you singular do love, you singular are loving. Even though it's singular you, in English we use a plural helping verb, are. We don't say you is loving. What about the rest of the forms? Same deal. So amat means he loves. She is loving. It does love. Ooh, love. I tried to write a D there again. Let's try that again. Love. Now, I am not saying that it's he loves, but she is loving. I'm showing all the different pronouns. So he loves, he is loving, he does love. She loves, she is loving, she does love. It loves, it is loving, it does love. All of those work. That's why I often put the slashes between the pronoun subjects and then just list them all. I could also have that singular nominative, right? So, Puella, Silwam, Amat. The girl, singular nominative, Amat, loves the forest. Why forest? Direct object. Singular accusative. Let's look at the plural. Amamos. We love. We do love. We are loving. Amatus. You, plural, love. You might say, y'all are loving. Y'all do love. One more, right? Amant. Amant. They love. They do love. They are loving. With me so far? Excellent. I know I can't hear your answer, but I'm anticipating that so far so good, or you can rewind and watch me again. So what can we practice? What can we look at? Let's see. When we're faced with a new verb, we need to remember that we're looking for two things. It's just like the nouns. Okay, so when we had puelli, we needed to identify what was the vocab portion, what told us the meaning of the word, and what was the ending portion that told us the case and number of the word. So Puel told us girl, AE told us genitive, dative, nominative, singular, singular, plural. And then we'd have to use the sentence to figure out the rest. Same deal with the verb. We need to divide it into the stemmy part and the ending. Now, if we saw just that S, we might think that the verb was wokati with an S ending for you singular. We don't have a verb stem that ends in I though, so that can't happen for us. We do know that first conjugation is going to give us either an O in the first person or a long or short A followed by one of those personal endings. So we can divide this here. Now we know we have woka and tis, not wokati and s. Woka, if you look in the vocab from lesson 2, means to call. Tis tells me that it's you plural. So I can say you plural call, do call, or are calling. Excellent. Let's try another one. Verb, laudamos. Laudamos. I look for my A. I use that as my divider. Now I need to identify lauda. Now if I go back to that first page, I go back to this note, I'll see that my pattern, I said the first page, helps to keep track of your pages as you're recording. Page 2 apparently had what I needed. I can see that if I go backwards from ama, I know that I re-add that RE gives me amari. And if I take off the ARE and put on an O, I have the first principal part. With me? So I've got lauda here. Okay, so that means my STEMI part is lauda, which means my infinitive is laudari. I'm going backwards now. And I know that my first principal part ends in O. I'm looking for laudo, laudare in the vocab. And that means to praise. So my lauda, I know means, I started to write lauda, to praise. And then I have my mus. Mus, so if I go through my personal endings, O or M, first person singular, S, second person singular, T, third person singular, mus, first person plural. First person plural. And then if I look at the personal pronoun chart, that person and number chart from our syntax note, I know that first plural is we. So I have we praise, we do praise, or we are praising. All packed in that one package, laudamos. So let's try the reverse. Let's go from English to Latin now. We are preparing. So the first thing I do is identify the vocab word that means to prepare. That verb is paro, parare, paravi, paratus. Now I need to form, so if I go back a moment, sorry for the earthquake, I go back to this page. The verb includes all of the parts over here. The we is the same, right? It's always first person plural. But over here we have praise, do praise, are praising. Here we have we are preparing. That are is part of this verb. Remember last lesson we learned sunt means are. We talked about that being a verb of being. That was like an equal sign. That verb sunt. This is not that are. This are is a helping verb. So when I say we are preparing, I mean the same as this and this. And I don't need those extra helper words in Latin. So I take my paro, parare, and I form my base. So I have parare. Remember, to form my base, I cut off that RE. So now I'm left with P-A-R-A. I'm going to hold on to my long mark until I've decided if I need it or not. Then I'm going to add my first person plural personal ending. So if I go through my endings, O or M, S-T, next one, muss. First person plural is muss. I know by looking at my notes, if not from memory, that I keep the long mark unless it's third person singular or plural. So I have para plus mus, paramus, which means all three. We prepare, we do prepare, we are preparing. New form. How about you plural do carry? The verb for carry is porto, portare. You might recognize this form if you canoe. Have you ever portaged a canoe? You pick it up out of the river and hold it up over your head and carry it. Portage a canoe. You plural do carry. I know do is all part of my verb. You, I know, is second person. I know I've got plural. So now I need to form my base. I form my base by taking my second principal part, cutting off the RE, porta. I'm going to hold off on that long mark. Second person plural. O or M, S-T is my singular. Mus, tis. Second plural is tis. I know it's second, not third, so I'm going to keep that long mark. Portatis. Portatis. You carry, you do carry, you are carrying. Not we don't want that one, okay? It's easy to make that because we use helping verbs in English, and we're going to learn how to say those helping verbs as their own verbs. So it's something to be on the lookout for. It's one of the things that makes Latin to English easier than English to Latin. I'm going to wrap up this video here. That's a walkthrough of lesson 2 notes. I didn't go step by step, but I talked about them all. And I talked about how to do A and B grammar exercises, because in those cases we'll be identifying and translating Latin to English and English to Latin verb forms. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you have any suggestions on how I can make these videos more helpful, I'd appreciate that too. Thank you.